In introduction, my name is Cynthia Smith. I'm one of many curators here at the museum. My focus is on socially responsible design. Tonight, this program is a World Habitat Day event, which are being hosted around the world throughout the month of October, reminding us that adequate shelter is a universal right. It's really great to see the number of people that came out. I think we have anticipating an overflow crowd, but I think a lot of people have been able to come in and sit in the back.
It's like TED.
It's like TED. There you go. Let me know if you're twittering, live twittering from the event. That would be good. I could then re-Twitter you. And I think this is really indication of the strong interest in the kind of work that we will be discussing tonight. In 2007, Cooper-Hewitt broke ground with an exhibition which focused on this area of design. Typically, professional designers focus on a small portion of the world's population, the top 10% of consumers. But there is a growing movement to design for the other 5.8 billion and growing number of people worldwide not generally served. The statistics are overwhelming. Over half the world lives on less than $2 a day, where they're barely getting their needs met. This, this level of poverty has been a call to action for designers, engineers, architects, social entrepreneurs, design journalists, you name, across the board. These designers are providing solutions which address the underpinnings of poverty, simple, low-cost innovations for better access to education, healthcare, transportation, energy, water, and sanitation. And acknowledging our responsibility as the nation's design museum and as a powerful resource for the public, Cooper-Hewitt is happy to participate tonight in this event. The exhibition that I was talking about in 2007 was called Design for the Other 90%. We're in the process of working on another exhibition in that series. But currently, we have Design for a Living World on display. I hope many of you got here early and were able to see that. And we're also in the midst of conducting our People's Design Award. So please go online, make your voices heard. You can nominate new and also vote now until 6 p.m. on October 20th of this year. The winner will be announced at our National Design Awards dinner on October 22nd. So do participate. It's a good way to get involved. In May of 2010, we will open the National Design Triennial, Why Design Now? This is the first triennial to be international in scope. Generally, we focus on projects in the United States, but we'll be showcasing the most innovative, forward-thinking designs over the last 3 years. The goal of the exhibition is to explore new design solutions that promote environmental stewardship, social equality, accessibility, and creative capital in the work of approximately 80, I think we're over 100 designers who are focusing on these critical issues. But tonight, I'm happy to say we have several esteemed and active players in this expanding area of design. All the way to my right, we have design journalist and chief editor of New York-based Metropolis Magazine, Susan Szenasy. Metropolis is an internationally recognized magazine of architecture, culture, and design, has won numerous awards. Susan started at Interior Magazines and rose from editorial assistant to senior editor. Next, she was a chief editor of Residential Interiors. She is an author, teacher of design history and ethics, and the guiding light behind Metropolis's Wonder Brands West, Net at Work, Business Unusual, Teaching Green, and Design Entrepreneurs Conferences. I know of her work and have been attended many panels by her and have been inspired by what she has to offer to the design world. Allan Chochinov is the editor-in-chief of the online industrial magazine and resource Core77.com. He is the strategist for Corofloat, and you can, if I mispronounce any of these, please correct me, .com and designdirectory.com. He consults on product design, design strategy, and writing. He works on projects in the medical and diagnostic fields, as well as in consumer products and workplace systems for the likes of Johnson & Johnson, Herman Miller, Federal Express, just to name a few. And in his spare time, he is an associate professor at Pratt Institute and has been named on numerous design and utility patents. Very busy. And also someone who I've sat in the audience and been inspired by what he has to say. So I'm very, very pleased to have you here tonight. And finally, the reason we're all here is Emily Pilloton, who is the founder of Project H Design and former managing editor of Inhabitat.com, which is where I originally first became of your work, and am a huge fan of that website and regularly receive it in my mailbox every morning. Emily is trained in architecture and product design. She writes, teaches, and lectures internationally about new social impact imperatives for the product design industry. She started Project H to provide a conduit and catalyst for need-based product design that empowers individuals, communities, and economies. Her book, Design Revolution, 100 Products That Empower People. We all seem to have a copy, except for Emily. She's going to show it on the screen.
Your photo up.
Is a collection and call to action for product design for social impact. I would say that we are in the midst of a revolution, as she identifies. I see it as a paradigm shift, which is engaging every sector, from the nonprofit to the for-profit, working very collaboratively in efforts to address the most critical issues of our day. And I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think the first, you'll be presenting us something, and I think Susan will be moderating a discussion.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a Q&A.
Okay, so thank you so much for hosting this event and for that introduction. Just to give a little context for many of you who may not know about the book or Project H, which is the organization I founded, I have a super speedy presentation, super speedy. So I just want to provide a little background on where this is coming from. The book, in a lot of ways, was sort of an extended mission statement for the organization. So I think seeing some of the work will put this in context really nicely. So Project H I founded in January of 2008. It's a nonprofit, and we are a global coalition of about a little bit over 300 designers working in 9 different chapters, 6 in the United States and 3 internationally. We work on humanitarian initiatives focused on, usually locally engaged, but looking at global issues. So just to give a really quick idea of our progress to date, we are very young. This is a very new endeavor, and so we're definitely learning as we go. We're a year and 8 months old. Our annual budget last year, which was our first fiscal year, was $46,000. 9 chapters made up of about 300 plus designers, 22 current projects, and a very small average donation of $53. So it's very much a shoestring organization, but we do a lot with a little. And I think we're learning how to scale some of our solutions very broadly. And then just to give again, really quick idea of some of the values with which we work. Some of these projects are very hard to prescribe a sort of set recipe or process for, but we do have a couple things that we try to do within all of our projects. And so the first one is there's no design without action. This is a very basic statement, but it just means that design is about action. It's a verb, it's not a noun. We don't sit around and just talk. All of our projects are very much engaged in a real community with real partners and real clients, and we bring them to fruition ourselves. There's not a lot of conceptual, we do conceptual sketching, but the ultimate goal is real implementation and feedback. The second is that we work with, not for, which this is sort of a departure from the way most designers traditionally work, where there's a designer and a client, and it's this kind of ping pong between the two. We like to bring we don't even call them clients really, we have partners, whether that's a community or another nonprofit. We like to bring them in from the very beginning for a couple of reasons. One, we get much better feedback down the line, but more importantly, to bring them into the process at the beginning, it becomes much more about co-creation, creating new stakeholders that can then grow the solution themselves. And it just sort of makes good sense, especially when some of these issues that we are tackling, we don't know much about. We do projects with foster care homes or for homelessness, and we as designers, when we need that information and that sort of humility from the beginning to even know where to start. The third is we start locally and scale globally, and I think this is an important point because we often think about design for social impact as something that is focused on the developing world, oceans away, but in fact there are a ton of problems worth solving in our own backyards, and we've also found that there are amazing parallels between, for example, the homeless communities in San Francisco and some of the slums in Mumbai. So to look locally first so that we can engage on a really real level and then figure out how to build those into models that can work elsewhere is our approach. Fourth, we create systems and not stuff. This is, again, a departure from traditional product design where it's all about sort of the commodity and the object. We like to view the product as a tool rather than an object, something that enables people or a community or an economy to do something else rather than just sort of a static thing. So we create systems instead of just stuff for the sake of stuff. Lastly, we measure, document, and share. And this is the one that we are continually working on. But obviously with a lot of these projects, the importance of feedback is huge, and creating really good relationships with our clients, partners, whatever we're calling them, so that we can continually improve and adapt. Okay, so now I'm going to show a couple projects that are, again, this is going to be super speedy, and if you have questions, we can talk about them later. The Hippo roller redesign, this was a water transport device in the developing world that many of you have probably seen. Much safer, much more efficient than the usual bucket on the head or some of the jerry cans. So our role in this was an existing object, existing product. We came to it seeing an opportunity to improve it with a very critical eye, saying this is something we know is great, but it could be much better, could be more affordable, could be more accessible to the people that need it. So our ultimate redesign was very simple. It just took this object, cut it in half, or not quite half, split it into two parts so that it can ship both nested and stacked. So it's about 2.5 times more efficient in the shipping process. So before 36 in one layer of a shipping container, and after 75. This is Abject Object, an initiative out of the Los Angeles chapter. This is a collaboration with a couple different homeless shelters in the area to design, produce, and sell retail garments and accessories using a lot of reclaimed textiles. So just really quickly, this is a very simple pocket scarf. And this is a great example of where the product is not really the point. It's the system and the enterprise behind it where these women are benefiting from the enterprise itself. And then this is my favorite one. This is our bag made from old parachutes that turns into a hammock. This is in development, a project with a this is showing up right, okay. With the Children's Hospital in Mexico City, this is a transplant ward where the children come and go very frequently and often have to stay for a couple days and then they leave. But there isn't a whole lot of comfort or storage. It's hard for them to bring things with them from where they're usually staying within the hospital. So this was it began as a conceptual sketch for how to provide more efficient storage for some of their belongings. And so this is in prototyping phases. Out of Austin, this is a foster care home, which involves the redesign of these spaces called the quiet rooms, where they put the children when they're misbehaving. And they're very inhumane spaces right now, converted janitor's closets, basically. So this was sort of a material and graphic study, because we had some really our design brief, without being gross here, but the design brief was, it has to be hosed down because we worry a lot about flying feces. That was what was the challenge. So this became really a material study, and how do you use just two-dimensional treatments to create a more therapeutic and engaged space. So this is an initial concept. Again, this is currently in development, but using some of the terminology that the therapists use and very simple graphics. There's this whole theory behind how you use labyrinths for therapy and meditation. So we're exploring how that might play out. Whirlwind Wheelchair, working with a group that exists that's based in San Francisco that has a design for a rugged, long wheelbase wheelchair that's used in the developing world. We're helping them improve it with a couple different features, a quick release axle and an anti-tilt bar, and also trying to help them work on some of their user feedback so they can possibly bring it to a US market. Did I not click that? The book, which is here, which we'll talk about, but as Cynthia said, it's a sort of a call to action and a compendium of mostly product design for social impact, designed by Scott Stoll, who is not here, but he did a marvelous job. Or maybe he is, I don't know.
Probably on the way to Memphis, maybe?
Oh, anyway, he's over there. So we can talk
the
about
overflow room? Put him right here.
I know, right? Scott! So, compendium call to action. There's also a piece in the book called The Designer's Handshake, which is sort of it's a tear-out sheet, and it's this sort of personal agreement to work as a designer with a certain set of values. And then the Design Revolution Roadshow, which next spring will be a traveling exhibition of some of these products, going to 22 different design schools, lecture, workshop, and Airstream exhibition. I currently live in that thing. I'm almost done, I promise. And then empowerment through food. This is something out of the New York chapter, working with some public schools on understanding food waste and production as ecology and public health, and using this as part of there's Scott.
Hi.
Yay! Using this as part of a public school curriculum. And then just in a related way, there are a couple other initiatives happening in other chapters that are looking at urban farming as well, including this is the Los Angeles chapter. I think this is the last one. This is a project that we did with the Bertie County schools in North Carolina. It's a very, very rural district, very underfunded, very underperforming. We built these steel towers to change the way that they use their computer lab spaces. Usually their computer labs, all the stations are they face the wall. The kids, there's a little table that comes out of the wall, and they face the wall, and they use this for testing and instruction. And so we changed the dynamic of the rooms and created these pod systems, which allow the kids to be more interactive, and also the teachers can now use it for instruction. This is something this is not finished. We've painted it and added a lot more stuff, but this is an ongoing initiative that we're hoping to implement with the whole district. And then, okay, this is the last one. This is the learning landscape, which was developed by a team of designers from the New York chapter and a couple other people. This is a really simple math playground made from reclaimed tires that are buried in the ground. Within this grid of tires, you can play a lot of different games that teach things like basic addition all the way up to geometry and basic algebra. Chalk on the tire, super, super simple, but the games are incredibly adaptive, and they work in a lot of different locations because math is universal. So this is, we built 4 more of them for that same school district in North Carolina, and most recently in the Dominican Republic. This is the superintendent, assistant superintendent, sorry. And then, as I said, most recently in the Dominican Republic. So I'm sorry that was so speedy, but maybe we could talk a little bit more about some of them.
Yes, we will. But before we do that, maybe we could get the lights up because I want you all to be involved. Emily's calling for action here, and I don't think a dark room is conducive to a lot of action. So I wanted Allan to talk about the context of Design Revolution, the book, and because he wrote this really wonderful foreword to the book. So I think he puts it in the context of where design is and what the importance of this book is. So Allan, please.
Well, thanks very much. I'm thrilled to be here. Always honored to be in the Cooper-Hewitt, and big congratulations on the publication of the book. As books go, this was a quick one. You know.
Yeah, it was speedy.
Yeah, congrats to Metropolis Books. I need to acknowledge this is a hot topic in design conferences and panel discussions, the gender imbalance in this panel discussion. You know, it's like
It's
typically, it's usually the opposite, especially in industrial design. So if you're going to tweet something,
We can bring Scott up
and
here.
I think the whole design for social impact sector is like the women are running away with this thing. So I think that's great, something to note. Well, I think we can all agree that, there is a design revolution going on right now. It was only a couple years ago that the first slide of every design presentation that you would attend at a conference was a picture of a landfill. I have pictures of designers showing pictures of landfills that I've shown. And already that's, you don't need to show that picture anymore. I think that there has been an amazing reckoning, and perhaps not out of a reaction or sort of a sense of responsibility, although I think that there's a lot to talk about there. I think it's just people are feeling really wonderful about designing things that create value, that add value in ways that have social impact. I think it's sort of built in. Designers want to improve things, and I think that getting past a point where we're designing things that are simply based on utility or simply based on aesthetics is just really liberating. I know as a design teacher, students come in with this. It's sort of beaten out of them, I'm afraid. And so I see this as almost like a natural state, and I would also say that any good designer sort of always did this. But what I love about this book is it's just this very browsable, very consumable, in a good way, compendium, as you say, of examples, high-tech, low-tech, design for development, the Wii Fit, Nike Plus, and of all the ways that design can really, affect change, operate in a social sphere. It talks about systems, it talks about services, but it does it through this, not secret entree, but this known entree where, and I talk about this a little bit in the foreword, people love stuff. They love things and objects, just they covet them. And so if that can be your entry point into creating change and consequence, I'm all for it. And it's just a very fun book to look through because that is its entry point very much.
So it's really interesting because I'm very hopeful. I think we all are very hopeful that this is a new phase, and if it's up to Emily, it will be a revolution. Definitely, she is a major card-carrying revolutionary. So, but there's something very frightening at the same time, because those of us who read Bernard Rudofsky at one time felt that there was a call to action before, and then it failed, and the good times took over, and responsibility went out the window, and everybody talked about big money and stardom, so and all of that business. And so how does our world right now, okay, so we'll talk about the economic and the social context, but right now we're in this world where we're still talking about stardom, and we're still talking about large wealthy firms. I just wanted to cite one thing that shocked the hell out of me yesterday, and I still don't know what to do with it. I was at the Four Seasons at a luncheon for the preservationists, and they gave an award to Cesar Pele, and he is building a building with a red glass facade. And he said publicly, well, it has a lot of cadmium in it, and we couldn't manufacture it here, so we took it to China. So this is a really scary moment because we are where this is where the power is right now. And this is where the power is in architecture, but that's also product design. That's also manufacturing. That's also distribution of materials. So it's everything. So in that context, Emily and Allan, first Emily, how do you maintain your optimism about all of this, and how do you just keep going ahead and doing this revolutionary work that you're doing? I mean, it's just what do you take? What do you drink?
It's in the water right now.
Actually, I have there you go. I have a question before I answer that for you. I mean, do you think that's ever going to go away? Do you think the cadmium? Do you think that mindset?
Cadmium wielding starchitect.
Well,
I think it's just gonna, or the scale's gonna tip. I mean, can we ever
bandolier
really?
of vials.
My wish is that it goes away, and certainly the Pelley office knows better because the son is a major environmentalist, and the former wife and mother of that son is a major environmentalist. So it is not off their radar. But the fact that he said that in a public forum, in a kind of accepting way, shocked me to the point where I just can't recover from it. And it's not, so that reaffirmed for me that there's a long way to go. And yes, it will eventually go away because laws will be established.
Sure.
But your optimism, that's my question.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if I would call it optimism so much as it just feels like what I should do. I mean, I don't wake up in the morning feeling like super happy. It just seems like, I mean, I do sometimes, most
Kinda
days. That's true, okay. But regardless, I mean, to me, it's less about, making sure I feel optimistic about the work and more like now we've created something. And in a lot of ways, Project H is only, 20 months old. And now that we've created something, it's almost like, okay, now we really have to figure out how to make it work. And putting something out into the world, that was a big challenge that I put out for myself. Like, I'm going to create something almost so that I have to figure out what to do with it. And I know that sounds awful, and I didn't have a business plan, but a lot of times it's just the initiative that you then have to figure out how to put a strategy around it and make something that not just one person, but a whole community of designers can find a place within. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
It's beginning to, but your chapters, your chapters activities are really inspiring. So every one of those projects that you showed came from one particular chapter in that area, or how does that work?
Most of them, yeah. I mean, there's the New York chapter heads, and hopefully some of the members are here, so maybe you can ask them about that in particular. But just in general, not to single you guys out, but just in general, the chapters they're totally self-initiated. So the chapter heads come to me and say, I want to start a chapter. They are sort of the ones that rise to the top as the people who are willing to put in the time to not just host green drinks, but really, really work on projects like they're a design firm, but they're volunteers. So it's a really different model. They also find all their own projects. So they have to look locally and do a lot of problem finding, which is something I never did in design school. I mean, you're given this brief that says, go design a bike rack for whatever, and you sort of wonder, well, maybe that's not why am I designing that in the first place? So to ask a chapter to look and find the problems first and then figure out what the brief is based on that, I think is a huge part of the process. But there's also, there is a lot of self-selection with who becomes a chapter head because they're that committed and who the members are. And there's always going to be a revolving door of volunteers, but it's the people who sort of get it and come back every week that make the projects really, really special. And
is there anyone here from the New York chapter that would like to give testimony? Who's
Dan
there?
and Christina.
Okay, stand up and be counted. Okay, so this is very interesting because what do you guys do as what you do every day? Just tell us a little bit, because I'd like to get a little profile of who gets involved in this. One of you, please.
I'm Chris, and this is Dan. We're the New York chapter. I work for Design Incubator, which is a small businesses come off the ground, and I'm an industrial designer. That's my full-time job. And then this is my other full-time job.
Yeah.
Okay, and your partner?
I'm Barry Grossman, and I am a full-time
All right, so
You look good with it on. Yeah.
it looks so.
Nice accessory.
So tell us how you got involved in making this chapter, because you obviously see a need. Were you aware of this kind of work, or did you want to do this kind of work when you were in school? You guys are young enough to have been in school fairly recently.
Yes, that is true. Thank you. I mean, personally, I definitely had this mindset. I don't know which way to look, but I definitely had this idea in my head of what I wanted to do and the type of design work I was hoping to do. And as I broke into the industry, I soon realized that that was almost a pipe dream. And not to say it was false hopes, but there were very few opportunities to do this type of work on a professional scale. And it was actually in 2007 when I attended Cooper-Hewitt's Design for the 90th Percentile. It sent a shockwave through me more than anything else I'd ever done, where I thought there are people out there who are doing this, and there is opportunity out there, and I just had to go find it.
So that's a really good point. I think Cynthia, you may want to talk to us about how you're evolving this idea, this dialogue here at the museum, because what you put out there is not a neutral effort. It has some very real consequences. So can you kind of take us to the next level where the museum will be?
Sure. Well, it was interesting when Design for the Other 90% opened. It really was obvious there wasn't a lot of. It was the first place that that kind of work had been gathered in one location, and there was a huge international response to it. The project kind of went viral, and I saw it as like kind of a mirror of what was going on all over the place, including what was probably happening in San Francisco. But it was just like kind of on the scene at that point. And so the museum took note of that, and all the way from within the curatorial departments, all the way up to our director, through to the acting director of the entire Smithsonian, took note of that. And people became very interested and said, what's going on? Why is this getting so much attention? And understanding that this was a shift, it was clearly a reflection of what was happening in the world. And we had just kind of identified it. There was a concrete decision made to continue to explore this area of design, expand upon this area of design. So we began looking for other projects, and Design for a Living World was one that came out of this that was put on with the Nature Conservancy. I'm part of a curatorial team that's working on the National Design Triennial, which is now international, that is focusing on this area of design, environmentally and socially conscious types of design, and looking all over the world, because no longer is design just, there are no borders now at this point. And beyond that, I am looking at other projects, more focused areas of design, because I think there are too many critical issues, and it kind of goes back to one of your initial questions, like, is this going to sustain itself? And I think that it is. And I think it's because there are too many intersecting critical issues at this point, and too many people talking to each other, and too much that it's not going to go away. And to what's interesting is to have professors, people who are teaching on the panel. I think all three of you teach. And that they're young people there's a demand coming up from the young designers. I'm trained as an industrial designer. We didn't learn this when I was in in school. So I think there's a real shift, and it's the designers of the world, the industrial designers, the architects are going to are taking a much more active role, and I think you see it from this panel, and probably anybody who's, I would imagine there's a number of designers in the room who are already beginning to take a lot of action.
Well, what's really interesting is that when we say there's this sort of bubbling up of energy from the student body, which I see it, you see it, we all see it, that there's more interest in this. And then when we say that, that can make the conversation go away, well, we don't need to do anything about it because they're coming and they're going to do it for the 21st century. So Allan, I'd like to ask you this. I mean, as a teacher and as a practicing designer and as a very critical observer of your profession, what changes can occur in education now, today, tomorrow when you go to school, that can actually happen and change things? Because there is such inertia among the instructors that I see. I see portfolios that make me cringe now.
Yeah.
And more portfolios that make me cringe than make me happy. And this is all, I think it's all due to the, it's due to a lot of things, but one of the things is that the teachers just aren't with it. So how do you see this action that Emily is pushing us toward, taking some sort of initiative in the schools so that education can change more quickly, so that these new students can be saved better?
I think there's a couple of things going on. When we think about design students, I think you're talking about credentialed or soon-to-be credentialed designers, and actually I want to come back to uncredentialed designers and sort of renegades and rogues, although I think that word's being sort of wrecked forever now. I love that word, but I think it is generational. I think that you have a lot of full-time faculty who teach what they teach, although I think you'd probably say that about all teachers. Teachers teach what they teach. And there is actually some utility in teaching a student how to design a coffee maker or a power drill, even though arguably we don't need any more of either of those, although we might. It's sort of up to the student to prove it. And so there is some defense in, well, we need to teach them how to make stuff so they can know how to make good stuff. I think that problem will sort of solve itself as newer people come into the teaching profession and older people start to retire from the teaching profession. That may take too long, perhaps. What I think we are seeing a little bit is that students who leave the sort of let's say, prototypical education system are saying, I don't actually want to do what I've been trained to do, even if they're not getting the ingredients. And actually, we have a Designers Accord Education Summit coming up in San Francisco later this month. So I'm actually working on a presentation on sort of practical tips and tricks for getting this into the curriculum, or into your curriculum as a teacher, from class 1. So I think that there are some techniques, but back to the point about people coming out, sometimes it's after they get their first job, 3 or 6 or 9 months, and they just want to kill themselves after. I mean, this was said before, that they end up doing some sort of inane packaging, design for some inane product, and
doorknobs.
Doorknobs, okay. How many people for doorknobs? And packaging, inane packaging, hands, yeah, a few. And it's something they already knew, right? But now that they're not in school and they don't have that safe ecosystem to be learning in, that they're actually going to practice, the rubber really sort of hits the road there. It's well, if I'm going to actually spend time doing this, I need it to be worthwhile for me. Also, the ace up their sleeve is that typically these people are young. They don't have sort of dependencies and families and expenses where they can afford to sort of, dick around for a while and find somebody really fantastic to just hitch on to. But then flipping it to what I alluded to before, the non-credential designer, the renegade designer. I met this woman, Elizabeth Scharf, last week at the Feast conference, and she was in Rwanda and was working on this project and discovered that a lot of factory workers weren't in the factory, that they were in the factory for 22 days. I'm sorry, I don't know the accurate number. And so she asked why, and she says, well, the women are menstruating. and so they're at home because they can't afford sanitary pads. And then she sort of looked further into it and discovered that obviously, female school children were missing school because, essentially they were using rags or nothing, and there was also an infection side to this. And she just realized that there was this huge problem. She looked around for the raw materials. She came back with, banana tree fibers, slapped them down on a MIT, lab, a guy that she knew, and said, you need to figure out a way to make sanitary pads out of this material. It's like, here's the problem, and here's your material that's there, right, Aprotech. And they did. And she just in a way, she stumbled into this problem. She just decided, I'm going to be, a change maker. She had real clarity about the problem and a potential solution. She had the material, she understood the consequences, and she just sort of made it happen. Not because she was trained to in school, though she had a lot of business acumen, and that did come from training in school. So, you do want to account for that. But I like those people who are sort of doing what they're not supposed to do, kind of like you.
What's interesting is I know Elizabeth. I actually went to school with her, and she has a degree in business and in international development, and that's really where. And I think that's so typical of what this area of design is. People see a problem, and then they work back from that to kind of come up. And some of the most interesting things are the innovations of the organizations behind it. And I think that's what's interesting about Project H, is that you're kind of creating this situation, and you're building the structure behind it. So I think that's typical of a lot of this kind of area. I would say also, I was just in Ghana, and I think we have to rethink this whole discussion about stuff. I understand from the global north that might be a problem, but there are problems in Ghana in their small little industrial sectors where they actually need to understand how to make a drill and bring that to the villages. So there is still a need to continue to think about that area of design and bringing our know-how and working in co-creation.
I think that's where I say, we don't need another power drill, or do we? And so you can find a context where you actually need a power drill. Maybe it's not powered, but it's more powerful than a screw. And then you design to that context. Just germane to the conversation in this book, though, in terms of Elizabeth, it came down to a piece of stuff. It came down to a sanitary napkin, to a sanitary pad. And so that seemed to be the key to unlock sort of the problem solution, something that would have found its way into the next edition to the book, for instance.
And to bring that into light with the contemporary kind of what's happening in the industrial design world, she actually went to a large name, I'm not going to name a name, the company, and said, we want to make this, and they told her it was going to take her X number of years and over $1 million, like an outrageous amount, and she did it on very little amount of money. So very interesting.
I should also note, and you're going to know more about this. I mean, it wasn't just the creation of this artifact. There's a business model. It's a microfinance. Typically microfinance community that she's building of manufacturers, buyers, and sellers. So she's not just dumping truckloads of these things in the community.
Right.
Yeah.
Emily, you wanted to add something?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Oh, no, about the drill.
Yes.
Sorry to go back to that. No, I think that's a really good point about, okay, do we need another drill? And this is the classic sort of, to ask a designer not to build a bridge, but how you cross a river. It's like, I think part of this revolution is rethinking what already exists and whether those are the best things, whether those are the best tools. I've seen people drill holes in Uganda incredibly quickly with a rope and the right kind of twig, and a lot of sweat. And on one hand, okay, we could, they could be designing tools and making them locally, but I think we need to find inspiration in some of those sort of developing world innovations. And this is kind of what AfriGadget and Maker Faire Africa are looking at, is not the first world top down, how can we design for them, but looking to the developing world for their own innovations and redefining what we know as the power drill.
I want to kind of finish up the education discussion here with your travels for travel plans. So this is really a wonderful idea to take your Airstream and unpack and repack and teach and rabble rouse and make people crazy and hopeful and everything. So it's a really cool idea. But I think what are you hearing when you talk to schools about this? Are you what do they expect? Do they want to lock you out? Do they want to bring you in? What's going on? What's the feedback?
Well, the first question is always, where the heck are we going to park that thing? But it's actually a really easy sell. I mean, at every school I've talked to, you say, we're going to show up in an Airstream, and we have a lot of amazing products that are humanitarian in nature or improve life, and they are worth seeing, and we want to do a lecture and a workshop. It's not a hard sell.
How bad could it be,
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. But, it's really the workshop that they're really curious about, because I think, the lecture, I can talk about the book or whatever, and the Airstream exhibition, it is what it is, but the workshop is where they really start asking questions, like, what are we working on? And is it just for students? Is it for teachers as well? And it actually is. It'll be educators and students, and actually members of the creative community, any designers that want to come. And I think that's where they start to get curious, and then they want to know, what are you bringing to us that we can then apply in our own curricula? And this is where something like the Designers Accord Educational Summit comes in really handy, where we're building these toolkits. And when we run the workshop, regardless of what the workshop is, that we're providing this structure and framework that then, after the Airstream pulls out of town, those educators can use those tools within their studios.
Is there a follow-up program that you have that you can check in with them, how they're doing? Because things happen, and then everybody gets involved in making toasters and things.
Doorknobs. Yes, although we haven't quite figured out the logistics. But I mean, the good thing is in planning this, we have 1 or 2 liaisons at each school that really get it, and those are going to be the people that hopefully down the line will have this community that we can go back to and say, what did you end up doing with this? And we're coming through again with 3 Airstreams this time. So, I hate the sort of hit and run design approach, and I hope that it creates not just a dialogue between Project H and the schools, but hopefully between the schools themselves.
So it's really interesting to me that the studio system that we have currently could be adapted to something much more dynamic than it is right now, in terms of how you teach design and how research is done in studios and how people come together around ideas. And my observation is that it really isn't used to its full power. What's your feeling, Allan? You teach a studio? Do you teach it?
Yes.
Okay. So what's your feeling, and Emily also, and all 3 of you, about this idea that you can actually soup up the system that we have and create much more activity and much more research and much more sort of productive research, and not just academic and removed research? What's your thought on this?
Well, I think it takes some hard work. I did a project with my SVA MFA Designers Author students last year. Also, Scott teaches in that program, and this was to design a prosthetic arm. A lot of this stuff is online, and I really sweated it over the summer preparing for this project, because, just a big belief in user-centered design, that you need to sort of meet the people that you're designing for. And because this was going to be for arm amputees, I had to make sure that the students had some primary research. And so it just took a lot of doing. We had John Cunningham, who lost his arm in Haditha, come in. He runs an organization called openprosthetics.org. We had Amy Mullins, a favorite of the design crew, come in actually 2 times. And Frank Wilson, who wrote this amazing book called The Hand. And so this was in a way to prepare the students, in a very real sense, sort of meet who you're designing for. Because it was sort of an outrageous task. I should preface this by saying these are a bunch of graphic design students who, honestly had no business designing a prosthetic arm, which is what I loved about it. and again, completely uncredentialed in that way. And they were amazing. They did an incredible work. I think largely because the preparation, the guests, and for me this is a really key concept, gave them permission to. That they said, it's going to be okay. You don't know what you're doing, but to be honest, nothing's happened in this area for 100 years. And again, how bad could it be? And the stuff that they came up with, frankly, no industrial designer, no prosthetist, no engineer would come up with. And the solutions were a little bit polarizing, because some were very aesthetic, very conceptual, very discursive, and others were very, very practical. I'll mention one. And then stop talking. But one of the annoyances John had talked about was wearing a button-down shirt, sort of a classic button-down shirt. It was very hard for him to get on and off wearing any number of his prosthetic arms. And so this one student developed these stretch buttons. So essentially you would replace the cuff buttons and the first few button-down buttons with these stretch buttons. Would just stretch over the device, the appliance. And there were 3 ways that you could do this. You could sew them on yourself, which is a little bit tricky if you have one arm. Or you could take them, you could take these buttons to a dry cleaner and say, could you replace these? Or you could actually send the shirt into the cloud and into the service, and they would replace the buttons and send it back. This student was actually very unhappy with this project and with his solution. But what we immediately recognized is that this solution would be amazing for people with arthritis. Millions of people, way beyond the amputee community. And so that a potential solution like this had scale. And so here was a guy who had no business designing a prosthetic arm, came upon this solution, didn't even like his solution, and potentially could impact millions and millions of people, including amputees, almost like sort of as a side, as a dessert topping. And so that was a great experience, I think, for me and for them, because it allowed them to mess around in an area that they frankly just did not believe that they'd be able to make any impact in. And showed great potential.
Well, the
permission was the point I wanted to make.
And I think the button story reminds me of the fact that I don't think we think enough about the whole system that we're designing for. I think we are always concentrating on an object or the assignment. And how do we begin to understand what it means to address a system? Because I think many of your projects are about systems and thinking about things that are much larger than an object. So how do we shift our brains into that mode of systems?
I don't know if it's so much a brain shift as changing the way that you work and making sure, like in the case of your studio where you brought certain people in who were good storytellers who could say what the issues were and what might be good solutions.
They can make it personal.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes a personal story. And I can't think of a single design studio that I took where it existed at all outside of the studio. And so I think once you are designing outside of the studio, where I helped run a studio designing solutions for homelessness, and it was kind of a big leap to get the students to go out and talk to people. And so, but I think that once that you do that, and once that's the beginning of your design process, then it's not so much about making yourself think about a system, but you have these stories, and that's the design brief. It's not this sheet of paper where you have to turn a shopping cart into a shelter. It's you talk to certain people and you know what the real stories are, and that's where it starts. And that's where the system comes into it, because you already have the human factors built into it. You probably recognize that it has to be a viable enterprise or venture, and I think it really stems from the sort of insularity of design studios and design in general, that's not usually our first step, is to go and talk to people. I mean, we're not good anthropologists most of the time. So
Well, I think many people who are teaching, especially product design, are used to dealing with statistics or figures given to them about this audience that they're designing for. So this personality thing, this sort of a very basic human action of telling a story, to reintroduce that into design at every level, not just the student level, but in the practice. I mean, I think I keep thinking if Pele got involved with some Chinese glass manufacturer, maybe he wouldn't have done that cadmium thing. So I really, I'm sorry for
Really
the
been on a
obsessing.
shake
This
about
is,
She hasn't gotten over it in 2 days.
I can't get over. I can't. I can't.
I think probably you and I both come to things a little bit like, from a mediagenic point of view or media-centric point of view. And, yes, these are the stories that are sort of easy to tell because these people are well known. And if they act as lightning rods for getting, people to think about, contemporary issues in design, then I think that they're useful. But I think we also have to, remember about, Paul Hawken and just so many people and so many organizations and so many, again, renegade groups just like making stuff that don't get talked about in a lot of the mainstream press, certainly. It is like a revolution out there. It doesn't have a name. It's not coordinated, all this stuff that he talks about. But it's happening like all over the world. To me, truly, this is the reason, to be hopeful. Whether, Metropolis or Core 77 talks about it, whether the Cooper-Hewitt has an exhibit about it, or whether it shows up in, your book, it's happening.
It adds to the discussion. So there must be some pent up reasoning out there in that audience, and maybe there's someone who actually likes to design toasters. Is there someone that'd like to say that we're off the mark and we shouldn't be talking about this? I mean, we'd like to hear your points of view here. Anyone in the audience? Yes. Please stand up and speak into the mic.
I don't know this. Okay. I don't think this is off the mark. Your conversation's off the mark at all. I think it's right. Everything needs to be said. But my question to you would be, from whether it's the banana leaf pads or whatever it might be, that might have been, let's say, that could have even been the idea of a local person, but getting these renegade ideas that might not have been put through your typical system, getting them funded, like how to go about that where the idea ends up being on people's radar and being a success story and making it into a book, as opposed to something where it's a great idea and maybe an art school had the idea, or maybe a small village group had the idea or whatever, but it never got the funding necessary to allow people to do it.
This is a critical point. I think often articulated in the expression, there's no design in sustainable design. That the real problems are economic, governmental, regulatory, military often, big systemic, plumbing problems.
But I think it also goes to what Emily was talking about and the whole conversation about making something, a drill for Ghana or something like that, is and I know specifically about this project by Elizabeth
I just
Sharp.
learned about this. I hope I didn't get much of it wrong.
You got it really right on,
Okay,
pretty much. Is that, and it's true, even some of the objects that were in Design for Other 90%, is that they initially, and they're usually not designers. Paul Pollock, who kind of inspired the show, is trained as a psychologist, so he knows how to listen. Mm-hmm. And that's what he did. He went and listened to 1 acre subsistent farmers in India to find out what they wanted, and then he created something based on that. He actually adapted something that already existed for them. But what he did is, and a lot of the ones that are more successful, is they take donor money, they build their pilot projects, But they create the project so it's economically
Look
sustainable
at how he
over
named
time.
that pump, right? The Moneymaker pump.
That's Martin Fisher.
Oh, sorry.
From Kickstart. But yeah, but that's exactly right.
There's
There
an
was an
example.
example of that. Martin Fisher, Kickstart International. It was all about creating enough income, but he didn't have the money up front, so he used donor money, but with the idea to create a sustainable business out of it, and that's exactly what Elizabeth is attempting to do. And you'll talk to her and she'll say, does she want money from Nike Foundation? No, she wants it from Nike because she wants it to be a business. That these places need industry there and business and to be seen as viable players in the world market. So I think that's a lot of the thinking that's going on into this area of design.
So I mean, I think that's great that Nike would donate to some project like that. But what's their self-interest in this? I mean, I think if they feel that their company, if a corporation feels that they can profit from it eventually, they're more likely to donate or invest in a project than if it's just one of the donations, which is very nice. It makes them feel good, and then they forget about it. And it's much more productive for them to feel that this is this also helps found their next phase of involvement in the marketplace, that there might be finding new audiences, new manufacturing. So how do we get to that? How do we begin to, are there any projects in your area of knowledge where that's happening? That, I mean, I think we'd like to hear about some of those.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say about the book that there's a category called enterprise in the book, which is sort of both the anomaly and I think the most interesting, because these are things that are not in the same way that abject object, the product doesn't really, I mean, it matters, but it's the enterprise behind it that makes it sort of an active design thinking rather than design creation. And I mean, I think people like Nokia and I mean, Grameen Danone is the one that comes to mind that's in the book. This is Mohammed Yunus from the Grameen Bank partnering with Danone, based in France, a totally social enterprise. Arguably, there wasn't a whole lot of design in this because they're food products, but the enterprise itself is, they're not measuring profits based on purely the dollar sign. It all feeds back into itself. And that's a company, Danone, I mean, one of the biggest food producers in the world, where it is about a market to them. It's not just about charity. And that's kind of the key, is starting to pull some of this money, not from the corporate philanthropy and corporate sustainability, but from the real sort of investments of that company and proving that there is a market. And this is sort of the next billion bottom of the pyramid economic approach.
So, but the cynic in me says that they get those little Indian kids hooked on aspartame, and then they're
Where's the book?
But I think that's where the shift is going to be. Once people can see that there's actually a way to make money in this, and I think that's when the real shift is going to take place. And I think we're in the middle of that. And that's why it's, I think, a paradigm shift, because people are trying to figure out, it's a little, people aren't quite sure what to do, so there's a lot of experimenting, a lot of like attempting this, that doesn't work. So I think we're right at the beginning of this shift. And as soon as people understand, businesses understand that there might be profit in making a more sustainable glass, not out of cadmium. You know, there's a real market for it, then things begin to shift. But there is going to be always a play between, I think, donor money and the final sustainable
investment
product.
money. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because everywhere I go, I hear people asking, "What's next? What do we do? What will we do?" I mean, every corporation, every firm, every design firm is asking where they will be and what they should plan for, because things aren't working the way they used to for anyone right now. And it's the idea of recovery coming back the way it did. I think most of us know that it's not going to be the same thing, because the world has shifted. And as you say, there is a paradigm shift, and there is a political shift, and there's a cultural shift. I mean,
again, to come back to this generational shift, I was a guest at Jen Vandermeer's class at ITP at NYU, and she had assigned them a product system pairing. And so they had to pitch this idea, and then she went around the room and asked them to define whether what they had come up with was a for-profit, not-for-profit, or art. And they were across the board. I love that, too. It's just like we divide everything in the world like that. And one of the students said, "Can you tell me the difference between for-profit and not-for-profit again?" And it actually wasn't out of ignorance. The student, I think it wasn't. I think that the student couldn't understand why they were mutually exclusive, that she had to pick. That's how I want to say it. That the teacher had made them put it into a bucket, and she was, again, this is a grad student, so she was probably 26 or 27, and she didn't understand why a for-profit company couldn't engage in projects that had social impact. And I was just so heartened by that, because she didn't see them as mutually exclusive. And it's probably where the fun is anyway. And so she'll go out and she'll decide to work for a company that doesn't make this division, or doesn't make this division part of their mission statement, where we're going to make our money over here, but we're going to give it over there. It's sort of, relatively straightforward way of doing it. But we're doing all of these things, and we're doing both of them all the time. That student is going to go work for that company and make that company even stronger. And that company is going to prosper. And the companies who aren't doing that are going to go away, maybe.
Well, it's interesting. John Carey is here. Get a mic here. I do. Sorry, John. He's here from Public Architecture, and I think their program is a really interesting one, because the 1% program for architecture offices to do pro bono work. And what's interesting, and I'd like John to talk about this, because the firms use this program almost to grow their skills, to understand their markets, to understand what's coming. Can you, John, stand up, let the nice folks see you, and talk about how this works?
Sure. Is this on now? Okay, great. Actually, Susan's had me do this in a few different cities, and I'm typically the last comment, so that might be good news for you all. So public architecture is really focused on mobilizing architects and designers to undertake pro bono design, and we focused on firms as opposed to individuals, just because individuals often take a lot of coordination, and a lot of the support that we can provide would then go into logistics and that kind of thing. And we think that firms have the ability to deliver fee-generating projects, and so they thus have the ability to generate pro bono projects at the same level. I'm trying to think how to explain this exactly. We've seen firms do this in every possible way. We have some very sophisticated large national firms, Perkins & Will, for example, HOK, Gensler, SOM, and others, that have themselves done it in very different ways. I think the firms that have taken a stand, made a position, made it known to all their employees, given their employees something to buy into, has really helped a great deal. And I think Perkins & Will is probably out in front on this. There's a woman named Karen Brown who, for the entire city of New York, is the Social Responsibility Initiative coordinator for Perkins & Will. And so she fields projects, vets them, makes them known to her staff, and they're then acted upon. It's again, many different approaches, but the key, I think, is that focusing on firms is truly scalable. It's really easy to focus on design schools. There are only 120 accredited architecture schools, so it's very simple for us to say these 120 schools need to do it better. Meanwhile, there's 22,000 architecture firms, and imagine if we could affect real change within each one of those, the potential impact is much, much greater.
So, and I'd like to add to that, because I have come across projects that have been done for this pro bono program, and what they all say, all the firms say, is that they use these projects to understand a larger audience, to another client, another possibility for developing an area of practice. Looking at materials in a different way, in a much more sort of less luxury way, and more more functional and more sort of performative way. And so they're doing some very interesting work for themselves that benefit the firm. So I think, and it is part of their business plan. And I think that's the point we're trying to make here. It's not just not as that graduate student said to you. I mean, it is true. They really wanted to be in one bucket. And I think that's the idea of not separating these things out. It's like when we separated women's movement and when we separated all of these things, it just doesn't have the power unless it is a part of the larger dialogue. So I think what you're doing, it's really interesting because you're being very inclusive in everything that you do, and the programs that you're bringing up are have possibilities for business formation. I mean, I really see that. I see some of the projects that your chapters are doing. I think there could be little mini businesses there.
Absolutely, and I think that's our next big hurdle. Is the sort of strategy around the activism, for sure.
So you need like somebody from a business school to partner with you.
Anyone?
MBAs? Any MBAs?
Yeah.
Anybody else in the audience who has some? Yes.
I actually was wondering where digital is in all of this. We're actually, there's a few of us here who are interaction designers in the digital realm, and I'm curious partly about Project H, and if you guys have thought about sort of adding that dimension into the projects that you approach or go after, and then just in terms of sort of the merging of the physical and the digital worlds in this whole sort of problem of sustainable design and the types of work that you're doing.
Yes, restate it.
Oh, the question was about digital interaction design and what role that plays and for Project H and beyond, how that might plug in some way, right?
Yeah, and in general,
And in general, yeah. As far as Project H goes, my honest answer is I don't know, but I will say that there are a couple of projects, the learning landscape in particular, which we are currently working really hard on. Okay, so now we have a learning landscape in six different schools. The teachers are creating new games, so it sort of lends itself perfectly to this network of teachers all over the world that are now sharing resources. And so that's something where we need to think about what that experience is like, what that interaction is like between a teacher in Uganda and a teacher in North Carolina, how they're talking to each other and sharing information. So there are some projects that are getting to that point where it's becoming a community who are sharing the same solution. And I think that's probably where it will fit in, is the communication between those people.
You sound like a candidate for a Project H chapter.
Yeah, maybe talk to the New York chapter.
This is a real,
New York
just if
chapter
I can
right there,
just
meet them.
jump in on this question, this is a real meme this week and this month on the internet, actually, about sustainability and internet, and how, well, statistic I read yesterday was 99% of the people on planet Earth don't have the internet. But certainly we're at the point where the majority of people's on the planet's first typical interaction of the internet is through their phone, not through a computer. And so again, the internet, at least this week, is being talked about as sort of a luxury of sustainable design solution enterprise. And the cell phone has certainly become almost like sort of the darling, the poster child of how to, where is the marriage between design for social impact and technology. I think the cell phone's getting a lot of pressure. So a lot of hopes put on the cell phone, and some great work done around it. Frog and PopTech, and a whole bunch of people, Nokia. And I think it's a really, really interesting question. I don't think that low tech and high tech, everything is specialized. You're going to have people who are going to be sort of better at these solutions, but it's a hot topic right now. Very interesting. You need electricity. It's fundamentally. Lots of people don't have it. Sorry. Or ways of generating electricity.
I also just wanted to chime in based on something we were talking about earlier, the power of storytelling, and I think that's a great space for interaction designers and people that are really plugged into this digital design area. That's a great way for it all to come together.
And to add to what you just said, Allan, I was up at MIT at the Media Lab talking to Sandy Petland, and he's been doing this kind of work for years around computers. And he said to me that mobile technology is going to be the new printing press, that the shift is going to take place around mobile
That's the
phones.
leapfrogging you talk about in your book.
Yeah, and that there's all kinds of applications that you can use, because it's all going to be very coming from the bottom up. Everybody in Africa has a cell phone, if you've been there lately, and that they can go into far remote areas and bringing in telemedicine into those areas. So working on those kind of programs that can then be applied, citizen journalism, all that kind of stuff is coming through the cell phone. And the computer is probably, sadly, going to go away a little bit, and it's going to be, a lot of it's going to be much smaller.
They're also talking like SMS. I mean, just
Yeah,
like not
text
iPhone, cell phone, like SMS for a while, a long while. So.
So maybe the Maasai tribe can figure out how to recycle those phones. We don't have a system. I mean, that's a design issue. That's a socially significant
Well, the one
design
laptop
issue.
per child product was really designed, there's actually extra screws in it for repair. So a lot of, Mary Lou Jepson built a lot of thought into, and in fact there are industries cropping up servicing these computers because they were built to be opened and fixed in many very deliberate ways. So there's a design solution built in for seeing the design, the inevitable design problems.
Okay, yes, over there.
It kind of goes on that path, what you're just talking about. In the digital age, and the more cell phones we have, the more towers we put up, excuse me, the more towers we put up, the more it affects ultimately nature. So how does all of what you're talking about play into that in a sustainable sense, in a real sustainable sense? I mean, I think that's so important. I mean, we're just building, and where are we going with it? Like, is our ultimate goal to be sustainable? If many of you could have some thoughts or suggestions on that.
I'd just like to say, I don't know if this is an answer, but it's a sort of a secondary comment, that, social impact is often, this is the bucket thing, the social impact over here, environmental impact over here, and it's sort of all the same thing at the end of the day. But I will also say, with something like the Hippo Roller project, that's very clearly, that thing is made from plastic. It's not all that responsibly produced, but you line that up against a family that can now start a business and send their 4 kids to school because they don't have to spend 4 hours getting water. So how do you balance those two things? And I don't frankly know the answer, but I do think that we just have to start thinking about it more holistically and not in their separate buckets. That it's just all, I don't really like the word responsibility, but I think it's just doing the right thing and doing the right thing in new ways.
Well, I think, we all share your concerns, and I think this paradigm shift that you're talking about, and this is more so than anything that when we used to call paradigm shift 20 years ago, that was not it. This is the one. And when we are talking about this, I think we have to assume that power comes from cleaner resources, more locally available resources, less coal, less atomic, less oil, and figure out how to power things in a much more benign way. And there are small items now that you can charge by the sun. There are very few of them. But I think that we need to think about all of that. And I think the current push for research in energy and research in production, and our federal government is being behind it finally. I think there might be something very interesting happening in the next 10 years in these areas, because 60 Minutes did that big blast on coal ash and how incredibly poisonous it is, and you can't get rid of it. And even though you remake products from it, it is still poisonous. So the point is that we have a problem, and we have an energy problem, and we have not only a use problem, but the fallout from that energy, and that is going to be central to our conversation as a culture. So I think the social responsibility issue hits on all levels, and that's ready to be solved. Any other questions back there? Yes, please. You're on, keep talking.
Joel McCower from greenbiz.com. I think one of the things we keep talking about business, and I think this whole idea of for-profit, non-profit, hobby, art is interesting. But I also think that one of the things that's going on with what you're writing about, Emily, is that there's not just a design revolution in products, but it's also a design revolution in business models. And I think what that starts to play into is where the lines are getting blurred, where there's social enterprise from small startup companies, nonprofits turning for-profits. There's big companies, very big companies, some of the largest companies in the world that are starting to spin off small local social enterprise. And they're doing it not because necessarily they want to they sell aspartame to or hire great sweatshops, but because these are their markets,
Right.
and these become huge innovation labs. The 100 products that you have, each one of them is a potential innovation for a Nike or a Nokia or Nestle. And you may or may not like those companies, but these are the companies that actually know how to scale this stuff and bring these solutions. So I think one of the things I find really interesting, and I know that you've got your hands full with your amazing underfunded organization, but there's a parallel effort that can take place around how do you create, what are the 100 new business models? What are the 100 new, experiments taking place that, of
Metropolis
which,
Books is like...
Yeah, Diana's taking notes.
Exactly, of which Muhammad Yunus is one. That's another interesting opportunity that takes what you're doing and brings it to a whole new level in terms of really reaching the scale that we need to reach.
You're totally right, and I'm the first person to say I'm not a good business person, but there are people like, the Stanford D School is one where it's sort of a design school, but it's really this sort of design thinking program where nothing is developed without a really keen sense of business and new markets. So I think that's a huge part of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we have space for 2 more questions. There's, yes, back there, yes. Eve? Yes.
Hi, Eve.
Hey, I just wanted to make a statement, especially after what you just mentioned. I love that Emily's name is right next to revolution, because what I think she represents is just that. And I wanted to say that the work that I do around the world, what I'm seeing is under 30 is what people are actually doing work on the ground. They're not waiting to figure out the exact business model or the exact design. They are out doing. And so you're just a great example. And I just wanted to say that I think that this revolution is here to stay, because I see it, there's thousands of people doing this work. And there's a groundswell. I just don't know when the tipping point is going to be. But this is not going to go away, because this generation will not let it go away. So.
Yeah, that seems like a really great one to wind it up on, because I think that's
And no more questions.
No more questions. It's a great going away charge, but Emily will be going upstairs to sign books, and you can engage her and everybody else here in further conversation.
Can I say one more thing really quickly? I'm sorry to have to do this, but I just want to mention that the New York chapter, the heads are here, and they're having a fundraiser on November 20th, and it's going to be awesome. So any of you New Yorkers, and also it's not aspartame. It's made from cow's milk and molasses from local farms, compensates for nutritional deficiencies, delivering calcium, protein, vitamins, minerals, and micronutrients. So it is the product as well that is social impact.
There you go.
Yeah, just to clear that up, yeah.